Hello, this is a lesson for math for Wednesday, May 6th, and today we are going to learn to read a graph. For today's lesson, you will need workbook pages 711 through 714, crayons, and a pencil. So make sure that you gather all your materials, go ahead and get ready. Next, we're going to watch our math video, and then after that, we will proceed to our lesson. So gather your materials and get ready to begin.
You solve problems using the strategy, use logical reasoning.
Hi there! Today is the Balloon Festival here at the Petting Zoo. We have seen some beautiful hot air balloons floating in the sky this morning. Look, there are some now! There are red and yellow balloons. They are so pretty. Click the red balloon to find out more. Wow! I know that someone will want to keep track of the number of hot air balloons that will be in the sky this morning. Hey, I wonder if there's a good way to keep track of the balloons and their colors. Maybe a graph will help. Let's figure out how to do that.
Aaron's graph shows red and yellow counters. How can Aaron read the graph to know whether there are more red counters or more yellow counters? The title of this graph is Red and Yellow Counters. There are two rows on the graph. Rows go across. There's one row for red counters and one row for yellow counters. What are the categories of this graph? Red counters and yellow counters. How many counters are there in the category for red counters? One, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 5 red counters. How many counters are there in the category for yellow counters? 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 yellow counters. Which category has more counters? Red. How do you know? The graph shows 5 red counters and 4 yellow counters. 5 counters are more than 4 counters. Click the category to show which has more. Aaron's graph shows red and yellow counters. How can Aaron read the graph to know whether there are more red counters or more yellow counters? What does Aaron's graph show her? There are more red counters than yellow counters. Ryan made a graph of his counters. How many counters are in each category? This graph shows counter colors. What are the categories? Red counters and yellow counters. How many red counters? That's right. There are 4 red counters. How many yellow counters? That's right. There are 6 yellow counters. Which category has more counters? Click to circle. That's right, there are more yellow counters than red counters. Now let's practice with the personal math trainer.
Here we are on page 711, and on this page we are going to read a graph. Now when we read a graph, all the information is already there for us. Over on the left side of your paper in the sorting or categorizing little mat, I've already put this here for you. I've shown you what it would look like if we already sorted the material or categorized the material that we had to put into the graph, okay? So Jane took her counters, okay? Jane took her counters and she sorted them, and these are the red ones that she had, and these are the yellow ones that she had. Now, she's already placed them into her graph. Now, this is what her graph looks like, which is what you have on your paper, all right? And in the top row, these are the yellow counters that I'm sorry, the red counters that she has. And on below that, in the bottom row, these are the yellow counters that she has. So now we're not moving or placing anything. Now we're just reading, okay? So we can look at this and we can say, all right, what is in our graph? In our graph, there are red and yellow counters. So if you look at the top of the graph, it has a label, a name that tells us what's in the graph. And it says red and yellow counters because that is what we are showing in our graph. All right, so what about our red and yellow counters? Well, let's count them. Let's show how many that we have. Our red counters, let's go ahead and count. 1, 2, 3. And if you look below that, they have the red counter right there. And so next to it, we have the number 3. Whoops, change colors. We have the number 3 right there, 3, to let us know that there are 3 red counters. And then next to that, we have a yellow counter to let us know next to that how many yellow counters there are. Count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, which is why the number 4 is already there for you to trace because there are 4 red counters. All right, so we practiced that one. Let's go to the next page and do some more. All right, class, we are now on page 712. And if you look here, again, our graph has already been filled in for us. And here, if you can see, they are counting or they are categorizing the number of color counters. And the color counters that they are categorizing, we can tell by looking at the outside of our graph right here. And what are those? They are categorizing yellow and red counters. All right, so what are we going to do first? Well, let's see. Let's look down at number 1 and see what they want us to do. We have 2 blank, non-colored, they're just plain, counters right there. Okay, so what do you think the first thing that we should do is? I think we should color the counters. I think that's a good idea. All right, what colors do you think that we should color them? If you said yellow and red, you are absolutely correct. Well, since the top row is yellow, let's color our first counter yellow. I still haven't gotten that pen. All right, and then our bottom row is red, so we are going to color our second counter red. I know I'm not doing a very good job, but I'm doing the best that I can. All right, so now our next step is to go in and count how many yellow counters are in our graph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Count your yellow counters and write the number that tells how many in that space next to the yellow counter. Then go back and count your red counters and write how many red counters are in that space. When you're finished, come down to number 2. And in the section for number 2, we have a yellow counter and a red counter. And I would like you to circle the color that shows there is more, okay? Which color has more? Are there more yellow counters or more red counters? Circle the counter that there are more of in our graph. Which color has more? Circle the color counter. When you're finished, flip to the next page. Now everybody should be looking at page 713. All right, and in this one, we are comparing, again, look at the top of our graph. It says counter colors, okay? So we are categorizing counter colors here. Now, whoever did this has already categorized and they've put it in their graph. And what are we categorizing here? If you look to the side outside of the graph, we are categorizing yellow and red counters. All right, now in our graph, the top row is yellow. I'm sorry, I keep messing that up. The top row is red and the bottom row is yellow. All right, so moving down to number 3 right here, we have 2 blank, empty, not colored counters. So what should we do first? We should color our counters. And what color do you think that we should color our first one? What color do you think? Red or yellow? If you said red, you are absolutely right, because red is the one in our top row. So we should do that one first because that one is first in our graph. So go ahead and color your your first one red. And then because our bottom row is yellow, we will color our second counter yellow, okay? Now, what's our next step after we've colored our counters to match our graph? That's right, go back and count. First, count your red counters up in your top row and write the number to tell how many red counters there are next to your red counter. Then count your yellow counters and go back to your yellow counter and write how many yellow ones there are next to the yellow counter. Now, when you're done with that, come down to number 4 and listen to the directions. I don't want you to circle the one that has more. This time, I want you to circle the color that has fewer. Remember, fewer means less, okay? Which color has fewer counters? Are there fewer red counters or fewer yellow counters? Circle the counter in this section. Circle the counter that has fewer, circle the color that has fewer counters. When you're done, turn to the next page. Now you should be looking at page 714. And for this page, you are going to need red and blue squares, or your counting cubes, your cube blocks. All right, we have paper or construction paper cut out squares. So you'll need red and blue ones. Make sure that you have a mixture of red and blue ones. You're going to need no more than 10, okay? And you need to have more blue than red. Okay, so make sure that you have those out. This is the page that you're going to be looking at, and this is what it's going to look like. And what you're going to have to do is decide which row on your graph you want to put your red and your blue in. Do you want to put your red in the top row over here, and then put your blue in the bottom row down here? Go ahead and start lining them up in your graph, okay? If you do that, start moving your cubes into your graph, and then your red ones. You can do the red on the top, the red on the bottom, it's your choice, but start moving your cubes into your graph. Now, You must have more blue than red. You have to have a greater amount of blue cubes than red cubes. So start working on that. I'm going to do the same thing on my graph, and I'll meet you on the next page. Okay, we are still on page 714. However, now you should have moved your colored, your red and your blue squares, or your red and your blue cubes, up into your graph, just like I have. And I've also colored the cubes outside of my graph according to where I put them. So I colored my top cube, the one on the top, I colored that one red, and I colored the cube on the bottom blue, because all of the cubes in my top row are red, and the cubes in my bottom row are blue. All right. You may have a different number of red cubes and blue cubes. It just depends on what you took out of your bag. Now I also colored the cubes down on the bottom because my first row is red and my second row is blue. So you should have colored your cubes already. Now, once we're done coloring our cubes and putting our cubes all into the graph, what is our next step? It's to count them. That's right. So, how many cubes do you have how many red cubes do you have in your graph? Go ahead and count your red cubes and write your number next to the red cube. Then count your blue cubes and write your number to tell how many blue cubes there are next to the blue cube. When you're finished writing the numbers to tell how many cubes of each color there are, circle the number that is greater. Which number is greater? Are there more red cubes or blue cubes? Circle the number that is greater. When you're done, that's all for math today. Go ahead and finish your other assignments, and I'll see you in a little bit.